New torch in for testing today. I have the JETBeam T4 Pro, and this was sent in via Gearbest. I thought I would have a look at this one because it seemed quite an interesting model. So I've laid everything out on the table for you to have a look, and we'll go through the torch in more detail. Just scanning across the front box of the torch, you can see some of the main features. Have a maximum output of 2580 lumens. It's rechargeable. You also get a 26650 included, and some of the spec on the side. And on the back of the box we have 4 power levels, 2 strobe modes. We have the range and the candela. Notice the candela is a little bit higher than some similar torches, so we'll have a look at the beam shots later on. This is the first JETBeam that I've looked at. Hopefully I'll be getting some more in to look at too. This is your warranty card and your certificates in there, and we'll have a look through the user manual. Pretty straightforward and well laid out. It's got all of the specifications and operation. Now, the only point that I'd make with this, there is a typo with the charging indicator light. There is only 2 colours with this. It doesn't have the blue LED on it, so that's just a typo that someone's made a mistake. I'm not sure why that is, so obviously just used the wrong word. A couple of translation errors in there, but it gets the job done. Now, charging cable uses a barrel style connector, not a micro USB, but the cable seems quite good quality. Just one advantage with that, it's probably going to be harder to mash up the port, very difficult. Included strap, very similar to other makers, decent quality, and you get a spare O-ring which is red. Now the case with this is good quality too. You also have a popper on the back with a velcro section. This is made of the neoprene type material, so it's got a bit of padding on there, a bit of protection. Nice fit for the torch, and this is the sort of torch that I would myself use a holster with. It's quite a compact torch, but still it's nice to have that included. Now looking at the body of this, it's a grey colour. You can see the large metal button, and they've also done some changes with the styling. They've given it sort of angles on the head and on the base cap, and on the side there you can see the fins for the sort of acts as a heat sink to help dissipate the heat. Take a closer look at that charging port. You can see that the LED below that. As I said, the one advantage with this would be that you can't really mash up the port, but it is exposed, there's no cover on it. Not sure if that's going to be a problem, possibly not, but if you lose the cable, perhaps would have preferred a normal charging port. Have a tripod thread for a standard tripod mount. That could possibly be of some use if you're using it as a work light, so you could attach it to a tripod and adjust the angle round. Quite happy with the build on this, feels very nicely made. We'll just unscrew the base cap. You can see that there's points there for the strap. Decent quality spring. A lot of grease on the threads. It's more of a sticky substance. It appears to be silicone, but it's thicker than most of the grease that I've looked at before. And the cell that's included is a protected one that's rated to 5,000 milliamps an hour. We're going to do a test on this later on, but there's no low voltage cutoff. You can use other cells, so just make sure that you don't run down the unprotected cells on this torch. Won't be a problem with this battery because it will just cut off. There you can see the contact point at the top. And a quick closer look at the threads. Square cut threads, decent quality, quite easy to screw and unscrew. Quick look at the reflector and LED. This is a Cree XHP50. You see quite a lot of texturing on the reflector, and notice how the part around the cluster of 4 LEDs is flat too. Also got a nice crenulated bezel on this, stainless steel. It's not actually that big a torch. It's got a bit more width than the 18650s, obviously due to the battery, but it's not a huge torch by any means. It's quite compact. Now on the button, that's an area which could be potentially hit and miss for some people. You have to push and hold it in for around about 3 seconds, or just under 3 seconds I counted, and if you tap it lightly it won't go off. That's to prevent a sort of accidental activation. Now when you're charging you'll see the green LED flash, and that goes to static when it's finished, and the maximum charging rate that I got was just under the 1.4 amps, so that's a decent charge rate. Onto the operation now. Push and hold, and it has a mode memory too, and then you can just tap through the power levels after that. Now for me this works okay, but there is quite a long press to get the torch on. You can quickly double press to get into the strobe mode if the torch is off, so that's probably not a problem. So if someone's potentially coming at you, you can at least activate the strobe. But the button is something which is going to make or break it for some people. I would have just shortened the length of time that it took to come on, perhaps a second, second and a half, about 50% of what it is at the minute. It just takes a bit of time getting used to it. Like I said though, the one advantage is that you can't really accidentally activate it. If you even if you stab it like that, it needs to be pushed and held in. And that avoids them having a lockout. Now when you headstand, you'll be able to see that you have the torch on, and it's pretty stable on the base stand as well. It's a bit different design to some torches, but I think they've done a pretty good job on it overall. And they've done a few things a bit differently. For example, that tripod mount, and they've made that triple section on the bottom as well for stability. And it's also pretty stable as well with the anti-roll design. It's nice to see that they've thought about that area of the torch. This is a section where you can attach a wrist strap that's included, or use your own, onto the battery test. Good result on this, just under 5,300 milliamps an hour. And the waterproof test in a bucket of water for half an hour didn't have any issues at all. Now when the battery is getting low, you'll see the red LED start to flash up. And you'll also notice it kick down in power level as well. You won't be able to access the higher levels. Onto my standard test, about 90 to 100 foot at the low level. Moving up to the next point. Now you can see with it's a slightly warm tint on this, even though it does not specify as a warm LED. We're up to the high level, which is similar to most 18650s. And then you start kicking it up to the highest. And we're up to the 2,580 lumens that they're rating it at, and you can see a nice spread of this, but you do get a slightly concentrated center as well, and you can see it here on the camera. So it's a mix of both, although it's a more floody light overall. It's a bit more diffused in person than the camera because it can't cope with the dynamic range. Now the wide angle test that I do is a fair old jump from the lowest to the next level. It's from 50 to 300, but the leveling makes sense for a torch with 4 power levels. An extra one would have been nice possibly. Gone from the high up to the top setting. You can see there's a nice jump up there. The torch does get pretty hot though after a few minutes. And up close we can see the beam pattern here. You can see that hot spot is more diffused in person, but you do have a sort of combination of both. And with the telephoto test I'll go up through the power levels. This isn't really designed for range. It's much more of a floody light, but it has a bit more range than some of the similar torches I've looked at from Clarus and from Olight. Same thing on this, I'm just moving up the power levels. And once you hit up to the top setting, that's where your extra range is going to come from with it due to the power output and that small area around the LED that's flat that's helped reflects the light. Down to the side of the house, you can see that big jump again from the low to the mid. Or from the ultra low to the low rather, and then up to the top setting. Camera actually adjusts that down because it's so bright. It's definitely pretty similar to the Olight and Clarus torches that I've used in terms of the maximum power output. Slightly different beam pattern on this. The lowest mode isn't really what I would call ultra low myself. It's probably a bit less than the 50 that they're rating it there. I'd say it's probably around about 35 to 40. And the low mode, again, that's not really what you would call low on a normal torch, but for this type of torch it probably is, and you get pretty good run times off of that level. I mean, they're quoting something around about 6.7 hours. That's for the low level at 300 lumens. So I would have liked possibly a lower level on that, maybe about 10 or 15. I just do the roof test now, and I'll start kicking it up through the power levels, and you can see here that I've made a note that it does drop down after a couple of minutes. It took about 9-10 minutes to drop down to the next power level. So you will feel the heat on that building up. It doesn't get too hot that you can't hold it. Do have a bit of range with this, particularly at the top power setting. You can see it's hitting the roof there quite nicely, and also in the distance there it's lighting up the roofs quite well, and they're a good distance away, those buildings. Onto the strobe shots, we have 2 strobe modes. You have the SOS and the fast flashing strobe. The SOS is lower in power and it's a bit quicker than some that I've looked at, but I don't really see that as a problem. Time to come to some conclusions with the T4 Pro torch. There's quite a lot to like about this torch, and there's a couple of things that I personally don't like particularly. The first is the side switch. I think that the length of time that it takes to turn on and off is a bit too long. It may not bother some people. I personally just prefer a switch which has either a click, a definite click. They could have added a two-stage switch, or they could have just shortened the length of time. So that's something which did bother me a bit. I got used to it after a while, but I think it's a weak point of the torch and definitely worth considering on the usability aspect. The other area would have been the charging port. The barrel connector is robust, but I think it makes much more sense to go for either the micro USB or to go for the Type-C, which is a newer type, and a cover for that as well. On the upside though, nice design, compact size, it's got a good power output, and you also have extended runtime, so it could be quite a useful work torch if you use a torch on a regular basis. So let me know what you think of the T4 Pro if you've used one, and I will catch up with you shortly in my next video review.